why is it important for people like Scarlett Johansson and Halle Berry, who also stepped away? Why is it important? Hollywood needs to understand why it is important for transgender humans to play transgender humans. And in addition to the fact that it's a damn job and it's already hard enough to get a job when you're a trans person. So now when they portray you in Hollywood and your story, they're going to go get a cisgender person to play that role too. But I think that when I say it, I'm speaking for you. So I want you to speak for yourself and just let people really understand why it is so important that not only they're in the writers' rooms, they're in the producer chairs, in the director seats, but they're also in front of the camera portraying the roles.
I think one of the biggest issues is that it reinforces this caricaturized culture of who we are. So we aren't caricatures. So, prime example, when you see Jared Leto going out to get that award for Dallas Buyers Club, he's doing it with a full face of hair. You know, not that again that women can't have goatees or beards, but I mean to the cis normative through the cis normative gaze, they just think, oh, that was all drag. It's a costume. It all comes off. And then, to your point, they're stealing economic opportunities from a community that on a national average makes less than $10,000 a year. And so we're already looking at the ways in which we've been erased from being able to make money in just like regular societal places like retail or, you know, an office but then when we have that one shot for those of us who are creators to tell our story or to add that layer of authenticity that has been missing, we're even deprived of that. And so essentially you're capitalizing off of trauma porn, because even when you look at the stories that are being told, they're stories that don't present us as whole people. We're always presented as having this, and not that those stories aren't important for people who are still searching for identity, right? However, you would think that of all the stories that have been told, we would get presented with a trans character that doesn't have an internal conflict, you know, based on who they are, that their actual conflict in the storyline has nothing to do with their gender, or that we're not there as an extension of someone's sexual, you know, deviancy or just different things like that. And so I think ultimately what makes it problematic is that when we tell them that it's hurtful, when we tell them that it's harmful, they push back the way Scarlett Johansson did and does. You know, when we continue to talk about the pain and suffering that we go through, and then J.K. Rowling still feels that it's necessary to step up and then say some fuck shit that's going to further propagate the notion that trans women are really just men who are trying to take up space from cis women, we really have to drive in accountability. But I think what makes it difficult is that some of the trans folks in Hollywood, they don't always want to say what needs to be said because it's this fear of this is my opportunity and I may lose it. And so what I would propose is that they start speaking up, because again, we need to stop subscribing to respectability politics authored by institutions that will never respect us. So you may think that, you know, you have, you know, they may make you feel special for 5 minutes, but they're going to move on to the next thing eventually. And so I feel that people on the ground need to support people who are in Hollywood and really uplift them and support them so that when they do speak up, they're supported and they're not erased and never heard of again. And I think that people in Hollywood, the trans folks in Hollywood, need to also stay connected to the community and stop letting white executives in Hollywood tell you what your journey and your story is, and to keep it authentic by staying plugged into the base.
That's right.
I think that shit's real. I think that it's also really exhausting when I'm 16 weeks in a room pitching a fucking story and all these people are minimizing that. And when it gets to the point where it's greenlit, you're like, fuck, it's more important to tell this story than to keep fighting that this episode needs to be directed by a trans person and not a cis white queer person. It's just like you there's a level of exhaustion that also prevents you from fighting the fight all the way through. I mean, I take responsibility for that, but when you're in those rooms, it's really, really difficult.
So I wanted to say this because a lot of the work of white supremacy is to divide and conquer. And so if you watch this whole thing with the Emmys, you see Latin people screaming, but the Black people got this. And then when they're talking about Pose, they bring up Billy Porter got nominated and, Angelica didn't. And so we are constantly fighting for the scraps while they feast at the top, and so we keep turning to another marginalized group and saying, but they got that. And I'm really trying to use my platform to unpack that and really address it, because you don't have to point out that another marginalized group is getting something in Hollywood to say we deserve a space as well. Because today we did a panel today, and there were some blind spots. And on the panel, Fed spoke up because there was no LGBTQ plus and trans representation, and there was no Black representation. And we were talking about Latinx people, and there was a blind spot. So two people offered to give up their seats, right? An Indigenous woman and a gay man, right? They both offered to give up their seats. And I was like, no, add more seats. Add more seats. You don't have to. And just like that, 11 people were on this panel where it normally would have been 9, because we have this Black mentality that there's only room at the top for one, when we know good and goddamn well that Hollywood is about money. So if tomorrow a bunch of trans shows showed up and them motherfuckers were making everybody rich, white people would be like, all the trans people are getting all the shows, right?
They already are giving that. They're already giving that by us asking for one role or for one, to Henry's point, for us to just produce one thing or like to be the director. And they're like, but. And it's just like, I think it's based on, again, this idea of meritocracy, this idea that all you have to do is just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and work as hard as we did, but you're talking to the bootless, as Dr. King would refer to it as. You know what I mean? You're talking to folks that haven't been afforded, we haven't even been afforded basic dignity and human respect and rights. You know what I mean? Let alone an opportunity to prove how brilliant and multifaceted and talented and gifted we are. And so I think that's also part of the fear, is that trans folks are divine. We're brilliant. We're not just coming from this boring, watered down, single axis, way of looking at the world. We bring so much with us. We are a culmination of all of our world's most beautiful attributes and aspects and all of that. And so they're afraid that they're going to get shown up. That's what
it's